Good morning, everyone. This is the HMIS Roundtable session starting at 10:45. We want to welcome everybody. This session is part of the 2020 Virtual Summit on Ending Homelessness. My name is Jill Shoemaker, and I'm going to be moderating this session. I want to go over a few housekeeping details. All attendees will be muted throughout the session. When you have questions or comments, please use the chat box. That's how we're going to be managing those today. If you are an attendee who needs CEUs, we are asking you to please check in and check out with us via the chat box. So if you could take a minute and type in your name and the word CEU into the chat box, and then I'll remind everyone to do the same thing at the end of the session. This process takes the place of a CEU log, and you will be receiving your credits via email. This session will be recorded. After the session is over, a video recording will be made available within the next couple of weeks. If you experience any audio or video issues, we are asking you to please log out and log back in. Today's HMIS Roundtable is being facilitated by members of the MCAH HMIS team, Jerry Leslie, the HMIS Director, and myself, Jill Shoemaker, an HMIS System Administrator. And in addition, our other HMIS team members are in attendance and will be involved in the discussion as well. So our plan for today is to talk about HMIS, questions, comments, concerns that you might have. And so what we'd like to do is to take a few minutes and ask you to type in to the chat box your top 2 priority topics. And then we're going to take a few minutes as those are rolling in, and as a group, we'll prioritize that list, and then we'll plan to address the top 5. If we have additional time, we'll move through the rest of the list, but that's going to be our plan for the day. So if you would please take a few minutes now and type in 2 of your top priority topics. And so we're going to take a minute to put those together into a plan.
Very good. So we want to welcome you all here. Just a couple little pieces as we get going. So first of all, if you go up and you check the chat and you notice some awkward messages, we were testing this out yesterday by quoting Doors song lyrics, and there was a comment in there that seemed a little bit awkward, but it was from the song Hello from the Doors. So that was rather interesting. And I will say this, for obviously those of you across the state of Michigan, if you notice me this morning, I'm like really bundled up. It is cold here this morning. Jill, you were looking nice and warm. I was gonna say Jason did too earlier, but winter is definitely starting to set in here way too early.
Yeah, I actually have my windows open today, so I have a little bit of fresh air in here.
Yeah, I was gonna say it definitely we're down in the freezing. I think I'm about ready to go clear out my garden from maybe this weekend and tear it all out and just hibernate it for the season. I don't know about the rest of you all, but if you're up in the UP, I think it already is frosted over by this point. So we do have some topics popping in already, some very good stuff. So number 1, Jill, if you want to, I'll just start reading these off. Oh, Vicky DeMar says snow in the UP. Yes, I figured you guys would already be dealing with that. So you know, I don't know the southern Beth here in southern UP in the Escanaba area, but I'm guessing Marquette and Baraga County and Keweenaw County, you guys are already dealing with that as we speak. So Marquette, Alger, Baraga, you guys are usually the first ones to get the white stuff pouring in there. Oh, topics. So one thing, the SSVF tool for HMI. So I think what they're talking about here is, so in Odd, you made this comment. Are you talking about the SSVF, a tool there, or are we talking? I think you may be talking about the import for VASH vouchers. If I'm wrong on that, let me know if it's something else. But I'm thinking that the import tool for getting VASH voucher data from the VA. And so I just want to double check with you on that one to make sure that that's, oh, yep, okay, that's what it is, yes. We have Lydia says unsheltered client data. How to collect unsheltered client data is a topic. And then Jill's, one of Jill's expert topics, the one that she spent so much time on, the new coordinated entry pages, and are they taking place of the HARA screening pages within the new coordinated entry model? And coupled with that one, Jill, Dale has a comment in here about coordinated entry data elements. I think we could just kind of lump that all together because it's kind of one big topic too. So the new coordinated entry data elements, we have like the coordinated entry event and assessment questions.
Okay.
And I'm looking, that is the topic list we have right now. So if you want to put anything else in, please type it in. We will wait to see if you get something in here in just the next few seconds. And while we're at this, I think we can probably, if we've got like 3 topics right here, unless we get a deluge of things in, we could probably just go down through the list. What do you think, Jill, and just tackle them? I'd probably, let's start with the coordinated entry stuff. I think that's definitely a hot button topic, and then we could roll back to the VASH and the unsheltered client data. And plus, I have some questions on the unsheltered client data. I want to kind of feel that out and see what they're wondering, if we could put kind of a frame around that. But yeah, if any of the rest of you want to put in something, feel free to do it. I will say that Jill and I kind of have come prepared for some stuff to talk about with you as well that are going to be some new things. Jill actually, coordinated entry was a big thing, so that's going to be right in her wheelhouse of what she's tackling. But I've got something that if you all want to see, just let me know. But something that you all have not seen yet, but something that we're very excited about. We call it the HMIS Data Warehouse, which is going to be a new reporting tool that we are developing for the state of Michigan, for all the COCs across Michigan, the local planning bodies. And I would, if you all are willing, just to put in a yes or no in the chat box. But if you're willing and wanting to take a look at our new potential reporting tool that we're developing, we'd be happy to show it. Just let us know by telling us the yes in the chat box, and we will show it. Oh, I'll get some exclamation points. So cool. Oh, good. Well, I think that's definitely yes. I got about 9 of them all of a sudden in a row. So that's a good sign. Okay. So, Jill, do we want to kick off with talking about coordinated entry? And so I think question number 1 is going to be basically talking about coordinated entry, the pages and the HARA screening pages, and what is going on and what our recommendations are with those.
Yeah. Coordinated entry has one of the hot topics during the past 6 months. So there was, I'm going to step back just a little bit and talk about HUD's requirement for coordinated entry and their suggestions for it. So about 3 or 4 years ago, HUD started to talk about communities using a coordinated entry philosophy or coordinated entry approach to encompass the whole community-wide service delivery system for our housing of our folks. So as they've been talking about it the last couple of years, the HUD group got together and decided that there would be a few new data entry or data elements into HMIS that they were going to require. And so as we were talking through coordinated entry the last, say, 18 months for both balance of state communities and independent jurisdictions, the thought is that this whole coordinated entry is a community response. It's not just a one agency response to coordinated entry, meaning screening and referrals and that sort of thing. And so as a result, for the coordinated entry project pages, the Balance of State Coordinated Entry group got together and talked with communities about this. And because we know that the APR that's going to come out for coordinated entry is going to encompass the whole community. So all HMIS projects in Service Point, in HMIS, are going to be part of the COC APR for coordinated entry. And this is for communities who are receiving coordinated entry dollars from HUD. So as an independent jurisdiction, you would be receiving a HUD grant, and for balance of state, that would be coming through the statewide dollars. And so we know that the coordinated entry APR is going to include all of those HMIS projects. So with that in mind, we, from the MICA perspective, from the HMIS perspective, we put together some draft responses or draft templates for folks to use. So as far as coordinated entry pages, our suggestion is that the coordinated entry page now be placed at the level 3 or at the community level. And the reason that we're doing that and suggest that we do that is so that when a crisis needs assessment happens, that if we put it at the level 3, and when we go to run a APR for the coordinated entry APR, we can run it from a provider page, that coordinated entry provider page, and include all of the subordinates in there. And as far as taking the place of the HARA screenings page, the coordinated entry project page is meant to be where that initial screening takes place. It's a pretty simple screening. The assessment, the coordinated entry assessment that we created is much shorter than the HARA screening assessment, because what we're determining at the very beginning of a crisis needs assessment is eligibility. Is the person who is calling, can they be diverted? So they're not in a housing situation or a homeless situation with a housing need. 2, they are in a situation where we would be providing some prevention services for them. Or 3, it's determined that they are category 1 homeless and in need of housing services. And so that initial crisis screening is meant to be short and is meant to assist communities in determining what path that person, that caller or person who is at one of our assessment centers, what their need is. And so communities have the option then to determine whether or not and how they're going to do a more in-depth assessment need to determine all of the other income, non-cash benefits, disability, that sort of thing, to find out what those other eligibility criteria are. And so is the coordinated entry page, so all this to say, the coordinated entry page sitting at a level 3 will in fact take the place of a HARA screening page in the fact that that coordinated entry page is where that basic crisis needs assessment is going to take place. And then that page essentially becomes a holding page. So if a caller or someone who presents at one of our assessment centers is in need of homeless services in housing, they will have an entry into that coordinated entry project page. And so they're going to stay open in that coordinated entry project page until housing has happened, whether that's in a rapid rehousing situation or a permanent supportive housing situation, or even an HCV or some other voucher. And so it becomes a holding page for folks as they're working through our service delivery system. The HARA screening page will not necessarily, it will not be used for a screening or a coordinated entry but there are some situations in some communities who may still want to use that HARA screening page to capture more in-depth information about a person or a family, and that's fine. You can do that, but putting those coordinated entry pages at a level 3 is going to allow us to be able to run an APR super quick. Some of those HARA screening pages sit at a level 5 or a level 4. And so running a report that encompasses all of the other projects within the community is not going to be an easy feat at that level 4. And so that's where the coordinated entry pages come into play. There are 3 new data elements. There's a coordinated entry event, a coordinated entry assessment, and also the current living situation. Those 3 elements are new to the coordinated entry process. Those 3 elements are can be found on the Hmis assessments that include coordinated entry assessment, street and shelter, rapid rehousing and prevention, update, and they are there for communities on those assessment for communities that may have multiple assessment points. So perhaps the person can either call or appear in person at the HARA or at a shelter, or perhaps street outreach is going to be the first line of a crisis needs assessment as well. And so we wanted to make sure that those 3 data elements were on those assessments for folks as you're working your coordinated entry process through your community process.
One thing to say
Jerry,
really quick. Oh, yeah. I was going to say one thing to say really quickly, and this is a tangent to everything that Jill has said, but I think it's just important to make you guys aware of this, is that current living situation question that Jill was talking about. We are likely, and this isn't 100% yet, but this is probably very likely, that question is going to be taking the place, or one of the key things that will be taking the place of the old homeless status question, the category 1, 2, 3, 4, when we're doing the annual reports. So when we are counting people who are going to be literally homeless going through the coordinated entry system, our logic in the future is probably going to be based for the coordinated entry side on how that question is answered. And then, of course, for like homeless service programs like street outreach, emergency shelter, if you will, it will, of course, be based on the fact that those projects are serving people who are literally homeless. So just wanted to let you know that that question is likely going to be key moving forward into 2021 as to how we actually do the homeless count going forward into the future.
Yeah, great point, Jerry.
We did have some good questions come in, Jill. Well, actually, Jessica Vale had a comment here from the Balance of State, our coordinator. She said, to go along with the CE HARA screen page discussion, the Balance of State CE committee just met yesterday and is working with guidance to coordinate with Micah about which additional assessments to use. And of course, Jill was a big part of this, but there's a process built out with True North as kind of a pilot process in the balance of state. And I think they're using that as kind of a template for how they're approaching that. So if you're part of the balance of state community, there's some additional balance of state guidance that's going to be coming out based upon some of the work that's already been done.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. We also have been getting quite a few questions into the help desk about it as well. And some of those questions relate to using additional assessments. And so that is absolutely something that one of the things that HUD did and always does is a lot of when they start to introduce these new concepts or these new philosophies, they really paint it with a with sort of a wide brushstroke, meaning that there's a lot of, they don't tell you, they don't prescribe exactly what you need to do. They give you the prescription. So for us, it's the 3 new data elements. They tell us that, and then they give us the APR and what they're going to be capturing from the APR. And then we are able to take those pieces of the prescription and then build our community process out from there. So we have some communities who don't necessarily want to use the shortened mishmash coordinated entry assessment. They want to continue to use, say, that HARA screening assessment or a COC intake assessment. So they're going to do, you know, like a basic screening, and then while they have the person on the phone or they are there in front of them, the assessment centers are going to do as much as they can in capturing the rest of the data, right? So information on income and disability and you know, to get those determining factors, maybe a VI SPDAT as well. So they're building, communities are building in their coordinated entry process that they have in their community, building the HMIS as a, you know, as a to make sure that they can capture what they want to with what they're doing with their coordinated entry process. And so there will be communities who will have multiple assessments and be able to take the templates that we, from the HMIS perspective, provided folks and building in a process. Jerry mentioned True North. And they took the template that we had for the data entry piece of it and then added in their like internal processes as well. And so there are, you know, those tools are meant to be a template. It's not we are not prescribing how to do it step by step. We are providing the basic template for what you need to capture in the HMIS in order to provide, in order to run an APR, but provide the services you need for your folks as you're working through that system.
Absolutely. And we got some really good questions in for you, Jill. I'm going to take, Victoria's got 2 of them. I'm going to take and group them together here. First of all, Jill, when a shelter is completing the CE assessment, will the referral be to, let's say, rapid rehousing or to a shelter bed?
That's a great question. It can be either and both.
Yep.
So if the shelter is providing, is going to be doing the crisis needs assessment, you can do a referral for a shelter bed. If they're already in the shelter and they're coming in at that particular time, and they are being assessed for potential rapid rehousing, then you can absolutely put that as a rapid rehousing. What you want to be careful with if you have multiple events is to make sure that those events are being closed out as they are met. So what we don't want to do is have 5 open events, 1 to shelter, 1 to rapid rehousing, and maybe then they went into PSH, or and then none of those are closed with an outcome. So one of the key pieces of that assessment is to ensure that there is an outcome to it. We do know, at least we know right now from an APR perspective, that they are going to be looking at those events and pulling the most recent one for APR. So we just want to make sure that if you are not required to do multiple events, but you absolutely can do them, multiple events, and you want to make sure that you have a process built in so that people are closing those out.
That's really critical, you all. And many of you know, like service transactions and incomes, that stuff like this can come back to haunt. So really make sure you're putting in 2 things, not only those events, but then also the entries and exits for coordinated entry. Make sure that if you are the party responsible for that CE page or the overseeing that you do have a process for regularly checking that data. And honestly, whether it be every 2 weeks, every month, however you do that, make sure that you're going through and checking some of those open entries and open events and closing them out as appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard some communities say that if our folks if we have a family that has a coordinated entry enrollment and they're going to be housed within rapid rehousing, that the rapid rehousing case manager is the one that will close them out of the case or the coordinated entry project page. So there's lots of different ways that you can manage that process, but absolutely have something built in so that you are ensuring that you don't have a lot of open events.
So the next question comes in. Victoria asks, what is the difference between current living situation and prior living situation? I think this is one we're going to be getting a lot over the next few months.
Yeah, so the current living situation is where that person is right now. So it is, for instance, if we're looking at a street outreach who's capturing the current living situation, that living situation is where they are right at this. So if they're out on the street, that's how the current living situation will be. And what we're looking at for the current living situation is that is going to help determine eligibility for chronic homelessness as well, but to determine crisis needs assessment on where the client is or the person is or family is right at this moment.
And that's really key right there, because we all know that there are situations where somebody's prior living situation may have been staying with family or friends or being housed in some form. But as of right now, when they walk through the doors of your agency, they're currently homeless because that is no longer an option for them. So that's really the key differentiating factor. As many of you know, that's always been kind of a challenge, the struggle. Historically, we actually, and this is like, I hate to tell the story because this is something that we all cringe about, but a long time ago, or maybe not so long ago, we had agencies that were looking at their prior living situation with people housed, and they were not letting people into shelter because the prior living situation was actually with somebody, and they said that they had to be on the streets in order to get into shelter, which obviously is not what we intend to do. The current living situation, again, is to reinforce the fact that even though somebody's prior situation may have been in a housing environment, currently they are homeless, and as such, they are going to be considered homeless for purposes of accessing resources.
Great questions.
So Jessica has a follow-up to Victoria's question. So would people lose their eligibility if the current living situation changes after referrals to some form of permanent housing, but before leasing up? So this is a situation if they're referred into PH, they have at least a property, but their current situation changes.
Jerry, will you say that again?
Okay, the question is what would happen if somebody is referred over to permanent housing? When they were referred, they were literally homeless, so staying in a shelter. But during the time that they're in that housing search, the current living situation changes to something else, so that they are actually, and Jessica, she's alluding to the fact that they may be quote unquote housed in a window, so that changes while somebody is looking for housing.
So that question is for Jessica.
That question, I think Jessica asked that question to us.
Oh, so from an HMIS perspective, what we're doing with that?
I think Jessica may have to unmute you from a program perspective, yeah, because
from a program perspective, right?
Yeah, let me see. Hang on, give me a second here.
Okay.
Let's see if I can. Shoot, I can't unmute Jessica. So I can't unmute you, Jessica. You don't have we don't have audio here. So that's strange. Okay. I am from a program perspective, I know what I want to say and I know what I am thinking to say, but I want to hold off on that one because I just want to confirm. So I'm going to stick my neck out on the line. Historically and stuff like that, if somebody does obtain housing, obviously they're housed, but there are some twists to this whole thing. And so I personally would rather not answer this question myself, just from the standpoint of there are some programmatic twists to this that would probably need to be discussed. And what I would highly recommend is again, looking at HUD guidance on this, because HUD does have some pretty specific guidance on this. And it's going to be based on a couple of different factors that come into play. So this is something that obviously talk to your people who are working with HUD, your HUD reps on this, but it is something I will defer to HUD on this particular question. Next question. Let's see where we at. Okay. I'll take this one. So if someone is leaving prison, how would I answer that question? They would be homeless on the street without any assistance. So this is an interesting question, really interesting. So most of you know the way that the homeless definition works is that somebody is not considered literally homeless if they are discharging from prison, but they they've stayed, let's say, in prison for longer than 90 days, or if they have been in prison, or prison, it wouldn't be prison in this case, but in jail less than 90 days, but they weren't homeless. They have to be homeless before entering incarceration and have spent less than 90 days on this. However, the one thing about the current living situation is if somebody is coming into a situation and they have no resources and they're homeless, and obviously, let's say you connect them with a shelter, they may not technically, for the sake of that right that moment, be homeless for referring them, let's say PH, but if you connect them with a shelter, they go over and they stay in the shelter because obviously there are no resources at that point. They're going to be homeless by virtue of the fact that they've stayed in the shelter. So that is a good question. Jill, anything you can think to add to that one?
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about this current living situation, I think, is it helps to clarify and codify some of the weaknesses we've had with the prior living situation and some of the nuances of the homeless definition. Because obviously the one thing that you always want to do is you want to make sure that not taking into consideration somebody has to be homeless before they're homeless. So in essence, if somebody is coming on the street with no resources and no other opportunities and you refer them to shelter, obviously that referral to shelter and they go and stay in shelter, the minute that happens, they get that Category 1 designation. And so they're going to be considered to be literally homeless. I especially think of that in terms of, let's say, families or anybody really, but somebody doesn't have to spend a night in the car to establish their homelessness. If you refer them to the shelter, they go over and they stay in the shelter, they are literally homeless for purposes of accessing resources and as you're going through and doing the evaluation. So are they still considered unsheltered Cat 1 for street outreach purposes if they present as unsheltered leaving incarceration if they refuse shelter? So obviously that's a little bit of a sticky situation in that very specific moment. But say, for instance, somebody leaves, they refuse shelter and they spend the night on the street, they stay on the street, that, you know, at that point they are going to be considered literally homeless for purposes of accessing resources. So say somebody is let out of jail, they go and they stay in a tent, they go and they stay in an encampment, they go and they stay in an abandoned building, they definitely will be considered to be Category 1 in that situation. Okay, Victoria says, is it going to cause an error if the prior living situation is staying with family and friends, and now they are presenting at the shelter, so they are Cat 1 for rapid rehousing purposes? Does this make sense? Jill, I want to have you jump in with on this one too, because this one's a little bit of a conundrum. I don't know that we've seen specifically logic and how that is going to interplay and interconnect specifically with, let's say, for instance, any federal reporting or the APR. Obviously, we don't know the specs on the CE APR yet, but is there anything you've heard in any of the meetings that would indicate that would be a problem, Jill?
No, I have not heard anything yet.
I haven't either. So yeah.
Yeah, we just don't know from a coordinated entry standpoint, from an APR standpoint, how that's going to look. So, but that's a great question. We'll know when we know, but other than that, yeah. I'm making note of it though, because it's something that I will do some research on.
And I think a lot of the answers to some of these questions, we're not going to really know that till we see a spec on, let's say, the coordinated entry APR and what that spec is going to entail, first of all, and how it's going to measure some of that. So until we actually see a spec or begin running one of those reports, there's going to be a lot of things that we probably won't know an answer to.
Right.
Good.
Because really we are learning this at the same rate that you all are. So, you know, I mean, as far as the coordinated entry goes and the suggestions and templates and discussions that we've made available, we are working on this at the same rate that you guys are, right? So we're talking as a group about this. So we know as much as you all do. So some of this is definitely going to be up in the air for us.
Oh, maybe. Oh, good question. Good question. So, okay. So Jessica actually brought up the fact that for some of these things, maybe they could go to Brett at the HUD Q&A question today, the Q&A session today. And I would say absolutely, that's a great way to handle those questions. Very good suggestion.
Yeah, I am looking forward to that session myself. I think there's going to be a lot of good content there. So I'm looking forward to that session too.
And Jessica, I think we probably could have made that session all afternoon and still we would have had questions that everybody would have been asking. So that's going to be really timely. That is good questions, everybody. Really good. So
great questions. And I will just I will just encourage everyone to continue to ask those questions and continue to send them into the help desk and to reach out to us, because sometimes those are, you know, there are situations that happen in communities that other communities can learn from as well. So we really want to keep the dialogue open, and we just encourage you to keep reaching out to us.
Very good. Yeah. So, and we did have a comment. This is a good one. I wonder if this will help us see some trends on how current living situations have changed and been affected by quarantine. And the comment is, I've noticed a lot more movement among the system within unsheltered clients, as well as more people becoming unsheltered due to COVID concerns from their temporary living situation. That is a very good point. And honestly, at some point, we're going to begin seeing some statewide data numbers of what that's going to look like. It sounds like you, Lydia, you're already seeing some of those things within your own data set. I would just keep track of that and be talking about that, and be saying that, hey, we're seeing this increase from our data, from the reports, and as we begin to see some of the same things with statewide data sets. This COVID window is going to be very interesting because there's going to be a lot of things that will be revealed from the 2020 data. And I just encourage you guys, if you're seeing some trends that are very unique, begin talking about those, because we're going to be doing the exact same thing in the next few weeks and months ahead. So if looks like we're pretty well covered. I'm going to jump back and get this, Jill. We did have Leah dropped in a couple. She followed your instructions to a T. She was awesome and gave us 5 topics. And I thought we could just kind of put those down there on the list before we move to the next one. And if we have time, we can tackle those too. But the first one she had,
so what do we? Yep.
Is COC funding for data entry. And the next one is assisting shelters with data entry and using data at the program or agency level. Basically, it sounds like obviously data entry at the agency or program level, and then how agencies and programs can use that data. The next one is HMIS reports prioritizing the most vulnerable. And the fourth is going to be fixing old errors, especially when things are being input in real time. And so I can see a number of suggestions on this one. Let's say income is a key one, I would think. Insurance might be another key one, or questions or responses that are not accurate that need to be fixed.
Did I get that right, Jerry?
You got it. Perfect.
All right.
Good. So with those in place, let's run up, if you all don't mind, we can talk a little bit about the VAST HMIS tool that I know many of you have been hearing about lately. So if you haven't been able to hear about this or wondering what this is talking about, long story short, HUD, through several of their bulletins coming out from the HUD Exchange, has made everybody aware that they've come to a understanding with the VA by which the VA is going to begin providing data from the VA medical centers via a export format that will be able to be imported into HMIS for clients who are housed using VASH vouchers. So there's been a couple emails coming out from this. The information is that there's supposed to be a tool in place as of November 1st to facilitate this. And that tool is going to be available to begin to provide the opportunities to import data in. One of the things I do want to say, there's a couple of things I do want to say about this that I think are going to be really important. Number one, even though HUD has made that announcement, the vendors and all of us who are kind of at the vanguard and the front end of the work in HMIS, we haven't seen specs on this yet, so we don't know exactly how this is going to look. That includes WellSky, who of course is our vendor for doing this. I think that in the next little bit they may be getting a test look at that, but according to our last communication with them, they are not in the aware right now of how that export spec is going to look. So there are some questions on that. I do want to say a couple things. So I'm reading the tea leaves on this one a little bit and just knowing some of the experiences that in the way that the systems work. This is going to be a great tool. And one of the things that I really want to encourage everybody to do is understand and have a realistic understanding of what this tool is going to be able to accomplish and what it's not going to be able to accomplish. Because there are going to be some things that it's going to really help you with, but at the same time, there may be some expectations that are going to be a little bit unrealistic as to how this is going to work. And this is largely due to the dynamic and the way that both HUD specs data to be stored, as well as the VA, how they spec that out. First thing that I'll tell you right now is from a standpoint of COC reporting, let's say system performance measures, LSA, obviously this data is going to be valuable for doing those type of activities. And that's really what HUD is intending this for, is to provide opportunities for COCs to have that data to include in their federal reporting activities, and via that to also up their HMIS participating rate for some of those permanent housing projects, which is really going to be helpful in that way. But the one thing that I do want to let people know and understand is when it comes to, let's say, using this data in a real-time coordinated entry environment, I won't guarantee this, but I'm going to tell you right now that this is likely not going to be something that is going to be able to be used in more of a real-time environment. There is likely going to be some degree of lag in this information getting into the system and how it works, which it may be down the road. This is going to be something that will be resolved. But currently, with the way that this information is flowing out and the way that an import process is going to have to take place, there's really not going to be a way to do it in near real-time structure to make this work. The second thing, and this is, I think, that where this is really going to be key with the way that the rubber hits the road, know that with VASH vouchers, that HUD of the VA, does not store information using the same structures that we regularly understand with COCs. So first of all, as you guys know, we have 5 VA medical centers in the state of Michigan. They do not break down things and store it and dissect it in quite the COC structures. There's going to have to be a degree of breaking that down in order to get that information out to the COCs. However, the one problem that we are going to have, if you're part of a balanced estate community, is I can't foresee any way that they're going to be able to provide that data broken out by like local planning body areas, whereby local planning bodies are going to have access to people housed within each of their jurisdictions. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be something where we're going to get that data piecemeal, because we obviously have a number of different VA medical centers crossing over the balance of state, and so we're going to have to get uploads from each of those medical centers. And based on the way that that works, I don't foresee any way that we're going to be able to subdivide that out into local planning bodies, where local planning bodies have ownership of that data and access to those clients that they're serving because of the nature of that. So I just want to put that out there as a bit of a realistic expectation that this is going to be good for federal reporting, but when it comes to a real-time tool and coordinating with coordinated entry and having that information there in a very readily accessible format, I don't foresee that being an immediate thing that's going to happen within this process. Okay, I'm trying to see what question do we want to go to next. Do we did have the question about unsheltered data, or do we want to tackle the HMIS data warehouse? If you guys want to just like put in the chat box which you'd rather tackle first, and we'll go to that topic. Okay, we got one for data warehouse. See what else? What are you guys thinking? Where do we want to go here with this?
So many things to choose from.
I know. I was gonna say we've made people totally there's a fear of missing out, so they don't want to pick one or the other. So yeah, please let us know. Just say which one you want to go to. Okay, we got two. Give us a couple others. Okay. Well, we got a couple for the data warehouse, so I think let me go ahead and Jill, let me make sure that I got everything up and ready, and now we'll take over the screen. Let me pull my mic a little bit closer here.
And then I'll monitor the chat box then.
Wonderful. Good. Okay, so I'm going to show you something. So I want to, before we jump in here, let me make a couple statements about this. So this is a tool in development right now. As many of you know, across the state, we've had a bit of a difficult time in the last couple of years just with reporting tools and being able to get data out of the system in quite the way that we've wanted to. Many of you know that ART itself, the advanced reporting tool, that's part of Service Point, has been aging, and I would say not very gracefully in some ways. It's been difficult for us. And at the same time, the quick reporting tool has not been ready for prime time. So we've been kind of stuck in the middle of this quandary, if you will, where we have not had really something that we've been able to produce things in quite the way that we've wanted to. The other challenge of it is the fact that we have often talked about having a tool that is a little bit more interactive in the sense that instead of giving you static data, it would actually allow you to select prompts and filters based upon certain subpopulations or certain characteristics that are within the reporting set, and then be able to do some diving into your data a little bit more in detail. So one of the things we're very fortunate to do is, as the Balance of State really stepped up last year and provided some funding to begin developing something called a data warehouse. And we are very excited about this. Basically what this is, and to clearly put this out there, this is a tool that takes the HUD, the data elements, so it takes our universal data elements and our program-specific data elements that are defined in the standard HUD export. We are able to import it into this data warehouse and then begin to do some analytics and some evaluation based on it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and many of you know that when you run, let's say, an ART report or run a report in Service Point, it takes forever for that report to load. The real reason behind that is not so much the data itself, but it's because you have to wade through a security model on top of the data. And many of you know we have nearly 2,000 users in the HMIS in the state of Michigan. We've got a huge implementation. And because of the size of that, the visibility model and the security model really slow things down in the ability to run reports. So the idea behind the data warehouse was, what if we did something where we stripped the really detailed visibility model off it to speed up performance of it, but then rebuilt a very simple visibility model on top of it. Now, what this means is, unlike with let's say Click or ART, it's really going to be impossible for us to give 2,000 people access to the data warehouse and maintain that on a regular basis, because that would be a number of just full-time jobs doing this. So what is going to end up happening with the data warehouse is it's going to have some limitations to usage. And that, like, let's say local planning bodies may have to select 1 or 2 people within their planning bodies to have access to it, and then work with other members of the local planning body to pull reports for it. But at the same time, by simplifying the visibility model, this is going to make this a much more efficient tool for doing data evaluation. The second thing about it is it's not going to be real time. And initially for the first runs of this, and again, we're still testing this. So we don't have a date in which this is going to be open for prime time for everybody across the state. We've got some key testing milestones we need to meet before we do this, but I am anticipating this is going to be something that will begin to be opening up to more parties probably early and then the first part of next year. We'll have some additional testers on it with a goal that, like, as we move through the year, we're going to be gradually phasing it in and opening it up more so. So know that this is not something where you drop up an email to us today and say, hey, can I have access to it? There's still a lot of development that needs to be done on it and some testing that needs to be done on it. But as we begin to clear some of those milestones we need to, we'll begin to open things up. So with that said, let's just go in here and take a look at this. So this is the data warehouse, the screen beginning, obviously login, a screen right here. One of the cool things that we see right away is we have a number of reporting options which are available to us right away. One of the reports that we're really working on right now is, as many of you know, we have our statewide demographics report that we pull for local planning bodies and COCs to see how many people you served. We've been working very closely with the organization that develops this warehouse to rebuild that same report structure and that report logic in a very similar way into the data warehouse. And so I'm actually going to go over to it. And if you just go down here and pull this up, it's this core demographics report. One of the things you're going to notice very quickly is, let's say, for instance, right here in the middle, you're going to see very quickly that the elements on this load so much faster than you're used to with the advanced reporting tool, where we sometimes have to wait 20-25 minutes to load this in ART. We are able to get some of this loaded within seconds in the data warehouse. And this, again, right here, is basically a breakdown of the categories exactly as we have them laid out within the demographics report that we have in ART. Now, one thing that you'll notice right away is we don't have all the tabs across the top or the bottom for subpopulations and filtering that down. It's because this report doesn't work in that way, that it lists everything out at once, because this report is designed to be dynamic. And that if you want to begin to filter down based upon the different groups, you actually use on the left-hand side here a series of filters which will allow you to break down and look at some of the data in a little bit more specific format. One of the things that's really cool, and I want to show you right from the get-go here, is by default we're running this for a reporting period of 2019, as you see right here. You can go ahead right from the get-go and select, let's say, a comparison period. Do this, and it will pop up, and you can select project population by project type. In this case, we want to stick with homeless. But you can also go, let's say, comparison period, go with the same period in the prior year. So if you set it as a quarter, it could go as a quarter. In this case, we want to run the basically the same calendar year, just 2018, but I can go ahead and click on this and then click on save and update and give it just a few moments to refresh. And you're going to see something extremely cool in just a moment while it's loading. What it's going to do is it's going to split the screen here, and you're going to see a comparison window for January 1st, 2019 through December 31st. The comparison for the same period in January 1st, 2018 through December 31st is going to populate in here. Now, again, like I said, we're in testing. This whole households issue here, we see even more households than there are clients. This is something that, again, these are some of the bugs that we're working through as we're going through this and correcting it, which is exactly why this is not quite ready for prime time right now. But if you look down here, you will literally see every one of these categories. You'll see the green is 2019, the current period. The orange is going to be 2018. So you can compare your numbers across your area that you're doing this data run for. In this case, we're running it for pretty much statewide, and so we're pulling this information. Now say, and this is where this gets really exciting, say for instance, because we have a big priority on racial equity, and you're saying, well, I want to see how many people who are Black or African American that we're serving, and then be able to compare it to the overall population. Well, first of all, you could download this report and keep a report here as being your overall population. But you can go over on the left-hand side, and if you see the demographics area, you're going to be able to select, let's say, races. It's going to bring up a listing of areas which we can filter down based on subpopulation. So in the case of race, let's say I want to do a comparison of Black or African American persons who are served by us. So take a look at that. I can go ahead and click Save and Update. And it is going to filter this down, and we're going to be able to see how many Black or African American clients that we have served in the same period of time, and give us the comparisons of across all of these demographic categories in the same way. And again, as you've seen, this all happens very quickly in less than a minute for a large data set. So we anticipate this is going to be really quick for you if you're doing this across a local planning body or a smaller CUC data set. Also, like, again, household type, we're talking about households. Let's say you want to look at just African-American households, which are households with adults and children. What you can do is right through there, you can filter this down. So adult and child only households, we can look at just households with children by clicking this, Save and Update. And it's going to go ahead and filter that down even further, so you can take a closer look at what the data is telling you. So with this said, again, this is going to be a really great tool, this demographics, because it's going to allow you to have a real time, or not real time in terms of from the system, but really a very fast reporting tool that's going to enable you to do some really good research on your subpopulations and the people you are serving, based upon your own ability just to go through here and filter and figure things out. So I'm just going to clear this out. If you go through and clear the filters out, it will return you back to the general population. So it's just a matter of clearing them out.
And Jerry, we do have a question that came in about, can you manually change the age range?
Unfortunately, no. So you can change it in terms of you go in here and there's going to be some things pre-programmed in here for filters. Unfortunately, that age range is going to have to be pre-programmed in based on the way that the reporting is working. Although, and this is probably going to be kind of a second tier thing we get down the pipe to, we are going to be looking at maybe breaking down into some more age categories so you can begin to work with it. Right now, I believe it's minors, 18 to 24, youth, and then of course we can filter down by each of the other race categories in here. So in this way, you can select multiple categories for ages. Whoops, right. But you couldn't break it down, and let's say I want people between 35 and 43, just by typing that in. So that would be the downside of what you could do here. However, within the 10-year range categories, you can begin to filter down a little bit more specifically.
No other questions.
Okay. So two of the big things that we want to get out the door when we get this tool out, and the things that we think are going to be the most valuable, are going to be, number one, a demographics report, as you guys obviously use these on a regular basis. The other thing are going to be performance and outcomes, because we know how important these are to the work we're doing. So we've already begun doing some draft development of some of those reports. And they're available through project type dashboards, is what we're calling these. Excuse me. So for instance, let's take a look at a permanent supportive housing dashboard. This is an early draft of what this tool is potentially going to look like. This will take a look at what the performance looks like in people who are enrolled in permanent supportive housing. So hopefully we get this to come up. It might be a little, there we go. There we go. So we are still, just so you know, doing some tweaking. There's going to be some more changes coming to the interface of this report as we move on. But this will give you a feel for what we're going for with it. So I actually want to run this in the window again, basically calendar year of 2019. So I'm going through and reselecting my prompts. In this case, January 2019 starts on the first day of the month, ends December 31st. This will be the end day of the month. So I'm going to update this. And you can see a bunch of really cool things begin to happen here when this comes up. The first thing that'll happen, and it's still loading, and this one takes a little bit more time to load because it has to go through and process a little bit more. But you see enrolled clients, if we scroll down here, this is essentially clients who have an entry into a project or a project start. Clients in search refers to people who are searching for housing but have not obtained housing yet. And clients in housing refers to clients who are actually housed using the project or the projects that you specified up above. This is one thing that we have put in that we have had multiple requests for, is that one of the big things in determining how you're doing in actually addressing the issues of homelessness is looking at client throughput. So how many people are coming in, how many people are exiting search. Search is basically looking for housing, and then obviously entering housing is being housed by the project, and how many people are exiting housing. This will show you the throughput of the specific type of project that the dashboard is built out for. So in this case, permanent supportive housing, we know during the period how many people are entering the project, how many people are exiting search, how many of those people are actually entering into housing. So we notice that we've got about 400 difference between people, 400 people who are not being housed by the project, who are exiting without housing, and then how many people with the reporting period are actually exiting the housing project. We also have a number of charts here that will show us the average amount of time, let's say in search here, and this will break it down based on the on a monthly basis, so you can see how that's changing. Time in search without exiting to housing, so people who are not housed, what does that look like? Time in search with any exit to destination, and then obviously time in housing with an exit to any destination. This is how long they are in the project. So this is basically looking at the length of time engaged in the project. You can also scroll down and there's going to be more information on people who are exiting into housing. And I do want to show you down here, this is going to show you when people are exiting the project, what are their exit destinations. So 71% are entering to some form of permanent housing. The 9% are exiting to unknown destination. The 9% are a temporary destination, and 5% are returning to shelter. So this is breaking down with 5% exiting to an institution. So this will actually show you where people are exiting to. And additionally, you can take a look at where people are exiting and if they're returning to homelessness within a 2-year period. So this is based on somewhat similar logic to what the system performance measures does. So you're going to be able to see if and what percentage of people are returning to homelessness out of these project types from the dashboard, and what the length of time that you're seeing for them returning to homelessness from their exit to the project. In this case, we have 10.4% of clients, 10.5% basically returning to homelessness across the 2-year period. So this data is looking again at the key things. We talk about length of time. We talk about discharge destination, positive destinations, and returns to homelessness, as well as the total number of clients served and the throughput of those clients. This is a tool designed to help you understand how clients are being served. And just like the other ones, you're going to have options to filter this by race, ethnicity, household type. And so you'll be able to evaluate certain subpopulations against your population as a whole to see how they're performing and have discussions around that data at local planning body levels, at COC levels, and obviously, hopefully, we're going to be doing this from a regional statewide level as we move forward with this project too. So Jill, I know we're getting close to our bewitching hour. We got about 4 minutes left here.
We have about 4 minutes. Yeah, there was a comment in the chat box about it looks great and thanks for working towards this tool.
To be honest with you, and I know that this has been a frustration for many of you, we've kind of kept this one under our hat for the last little bit. So we were starting to work on this thing early this year, but unfortunately, as you all know, just like you all with everything that happened, we were distracted by COVID. So we were only able to really begin putting time into it this summer. We are putting a considerable amount of time in this because this is one of the top priorities we have right now to get out the door, because we know you all are wanting tools to evaluate, and getting this tool in your hands is really a top priority right now from our HMIS team perspective. And we're looking forward to getting something that's functional and beginning to pull you all on board with using it and making good use of the data that is contained in it.
So it's about 11:58, so we might have, time to maybe tackle the unsheltered client data question, but really other than that, we are really at the end of our session already. It went so fast.
It did. And I do want to ask, and who was it that asked? Was it Lydia that asked that question? And I want to kind of see, so if some of you have to jump off here at noon, feel free to do it. We'll try not to run you too late, but see if we have some time to tackle this. But Lydia, I just want to ask you, could you put that question in a little bit of context for us when you're talking about tracking unsheltered data? I'm trying to figure out a little bit more on what situations are you talking about? Would it be in a street outreach situation, or collecting data from coordinated entry for people who are unsheltered? Or maybe if you could frame it a little bit better, we could help. Unless, Jill, is there something that was said there that would be helpful to put it in context?
No, not that I can see. So a little explanation would be good. And then I think because we're right at that 11:59, I will just go ahead and for those of you who want to stay on, please do. For those of you who need to leave at noon, we just put out a thank you to all of you for your great questions today and attending the session. Thank you from the HMIS team. We hope that it was a helpful session for you. We really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Just a reminder that this this session is recorded and will be made available sometime within the next couple of weeks. And if you are an attendee who needs CEUs, please check out with us via the chat box and just type in your name and the word CEU. Okay, so let's see. Got CEU, thank yous. I don't see anything yet coming in.
Well, if Lydia, if it's maybe a little bit more involved a question, one thing I definitely would say, if you want to, feel free to type it up, write an email out and send it to us at the help desk. If you have some questions, we'd be happy to tackle with you. The deal with unsheltered information is there's so many nuances to it for people who are experiencing an unsheltered environment. So if we understand a little bit better on some of the challenges you may be seeing, and we could put it in context, we would be more than happy to work with you or schedule a call to work with you on that.
Yes, we love when we get tickets into the help desk, so we encourage everybody to do that as often as possible. So we appreciate that. All right, so we do have some folks who are going to be receiving some CEUs, so thank you for putting your name into the chat box. And other than that, we're going to stick around for a few minutes and just wish everybody a great rest of the summit, and hope that you enjoy the remaining sessions. And thank you very much for coming to our session today and for all your great questions.
Absolutely. And if you stick around for just a couple seconds,